Hi, everyone. So my name is Deborah Rippol. Thanks for the introduction. So who here actually has heard of Startup Weekend before? Yay, nice. Who here has heard of Startup Digest? Great, cool. So just a little bit of background on UP as an organization. We are actually the umbrella brand for all of those programs that have been launched over the years. Started off only as Startup Weekend and grew as a bigger organization. To give you a bit of background, sorry. Oh, my GIFs are just... So actually, what I wanted to say is that... Oh.
Say it again.
No, so what I wanted to say is actually related to that, is the fact that the background of this presentation here is to talk about startup communities and entrepreneurship, and especially as an organization, UP is actually a nonprofit organization, and we've run about 2,000 events in 120 countries now with 200,000 participants. We actually have a tremendous amount of data, and we're actually on the other end of the spectrum of the organizations that, as you're all interested in data, we actually are the ones that really need your help in a way because we are making not enough good use of the data. So I think we're like basically a typical client in a way. So I wanted to also say that I'm not a chief data scientist officer at this organization, and in a way, any technical difficulties we'll see is only if my GIFs don't work. So, sorry, I'm really heading too fast. So just a little bit of like personal story, because I always like to explain how I came across Startup Weekend and UP as an organization so that you understand my background a bit and how I view it and why I really, really care about it. 4 years ago, a little short story, 4 years ago, I was in the south of France in Montpellier for those who know French geography. And my flatmate told me, oh, you're such a geek, you're going to love that event that I'm organizing. It's called Startup Weekend, you should really go to it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's about entrepreneurship? Like, I don't know anything about entrepreneurs, that's not my thing. She kind of forced me to go, and I bought my ticket 2 hours before the event, and I was completely mind-blown about the whole thing. From thinking that I was going to help out for coffee, I went to leading a team there and winning the event, and then went to about 7 startup weekends in a row. I'm a very enthusiastic person, so I really jumped on the opportunity to meet new people and to understand better startup ecosystems and to learn new things. So that was a pretty incredible journey, and it went to become even more incredible when I got the opportunity to open the European office of Startup Weekend. So I moved to London about 3 years ago, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So we grew from an organization that was only doing Startup Weekend, which I'm going to explain in a minute, to having a lot more programs that help entrepreneurs. Geez, my GIF is really acting. So for those of you who haven't raised their hands, you might be wondering, what is she talking about? What is that event at Startup Weekend? It sounds fun, but what is it exactly? What it is, what it says in the name. It's an event where you create a startup in a weekend. So as a participant, you would go there and you would pitch an idea. You'd have 60 seconds on stage to pitch and say what your idea is, to get people motivated by it. Then you get selected by popular votes. So it's really organic and funny because we have just 3 sticky notes. You vote for the ideas you like the most, and then you get selected. You then form a team around that idea. So you start working on a startup with people that you don't know, and then you basically work on that straight for 54 hours. Then you have mentorship. You have people helping you out during the event, and then at the end you pitch again on the Sunday night in front of a judging panel of usually investors, but also just business angels and people that are in the entrepreneurial scene. So from the attendee standpoint, it really is a huge roller coaster of emotions. It really is what you would have if you were actually creating a startup in the outside world, but in a more protected way, in a more condensed way. So for those of you who are entrepreneurs, I'm sure you totally understand that thing here, that entrepreneurship is such an emotional roller coaster, and there's just so many things that you learn along the way, by bringing your friends, your family, your investors along that huge ride. I see some heads nodding, it's perfect. It is really, truly a very difficult journey that you usually go through. So as an organization, that is trying to help entrepreneurs, but also to understand them, and that's where data comes in. A lot of things that we've gathered along the way led us to understand what the journey of an entrepreneur actually is. So I'm going to describe that really quickly. As a wannabe entrepreneur, you start by being inspired. So I don't know where, if you're entrepreneurs or if you want to be entrepreneurs, where is it that you guys got inspired? I would say the moment that I told you about earlier, the moment when I went to my first startup weekend was the click moment for me. But for some people, it would be the moment where your parents start talking to you about it, or you go to university and you study on an entrepreneurial track, or a friend of yours creates a company and you just think, oh wow, that sounds like a really cool opportunity to get more passionate about my job. So you have that moment where you get inspired, but then you probably have another click that's when you start seeking knowledge and seeking other like-minded people that want to do the same thing as you. It's really important. Like support networks and the understanding of what startups are really important. So you then go on to become a founder and try to execute on that idea alone or with others. And then the journey gets along with actually being a startup. So many people have so many different definitions on what startups actually are and how what is a startup versus what's a corporation, what's just a founder. I'm not going to go into that debate at all, but what we think a startup is an organization that's seeking a scalable business model where basically you iterate as a team or as a founder into finding the right business model. Then you go to the stage where you start scaling up and seeking the maximum success of your core mission. So really when you're at a point where you just want to obviously grow your company. And then becoming a champion really means being recognized as the leading organization in your field and being somebody that in a way can help other people kind of close that loop. So I'm not going to talk too much about what we do at Up Europe, but those programs that we have, we started off with Startup Weekend, but the programs that we have are just really meant to help people along the way in all those different steps. So we went from understanding that, okay, Startup Weekend answers one problem to having more feedback from people and having more data on entrepreneurs and doing more research and realizing that, hey, there's other problems to solve for entrepreneurs, so let's help them do that. But still, we're in the same bunch of people that keep wondering, why do 90% of startups fail? And this is where our mission comes in, really. In a way, it's like making entrepreneurs understand better what startups are and how they can achieve success. But really, it's also about iterating so that we can envision a world in which every person has the opportunity to experience and become an entrepreneur. And that's my dream. Ideally, we would all at least find a moment where we can step in the shoes of the entrepreneur and iterate until we find that sweet spot of becoming an entrepreneur. We don't do that by ourselves. This is a picture of our last summit we had where more than 500 of our community leaders from around the world came in. It was in Vegas. It was a really fun experience for sure, but what it represents here is people from 120 countries. We basically have people around the world that are the ones that give us the right information, that tell us, that give us feedback, and that allow us not to be only a global organization, but to have those local roots and to really hear from them. So along the way, and it's a 5-year-old organization now, along the way of working with those people every day, there's things that we have learned about what makes a successful startup community and how to give that appropriate support for entrepreneurs. So I'm going to go through them really quick. I think it's one of the information that we gathered that was the most useful for us in terms of trying to have a bigger goal and not only just having more events, but becoming an organization that has, okay, this is what we want people to achieve and this is what we want communities to achieve. So entrepreneurial culture is something that really is important, and in a way it's easy to say like that. It's a lot of people talk about people being more less risk averse, and that especially in Europe we all have that problem. People don't know how to take risks. They don't understand that culture. I think in a way it's also about having more visibility about entrepreneurship. That step that I was talking about earlier, about the inspire stage. That's really important. If you don't even hear about entrepreneurs, how are you even meant to try to become one? So the entrepreneurial culture is really important. Then mentors and coaches, having well-respected mentors and advisors that can really give back is really important. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. You're an entrepreneur. You want to meet other entrepreneurs that have made some of the mistakes you're about to make and tell you about it before you make them. So that is really key to a thriving startup community. Then support services. This one is actually really often forgotten, but in a way, if you're creating your startup, you don't want to only talk to like accountants and like lawyers and consultants that don't understand startups. So that entrepreneurial culture needs to apply not only to you as a company, but to everyone around you that's going to support you. Because you want people that are specialized and that understand your business model, that understand that you're like a 6-month-old company. You want to have those people in front of you to support you, basically. Then corporate engagement, again, that's one of the ones that is often forgotten, but corporate engagement is really important. Not only corporations can connect you with potential customers, but especially in an environment like in Europe where we say that there's not enough IPOs and that a lot more companies could go to the next stage and then they go to the US and get bought. In a way, that corporate engagement, that connection that you can make early on, and the fact that corporates can get involved in entrepreneurship, not only is it good for them because they start being more innovative from the inside, but also good for the startups themselves. Government. Again, one that's forgotten because it's just a really tough one and a really long-term one as well to influence. But strong government support really to me, is also about governments recognizing that startups and entrepreneurs are economic drivers and that they're important, they're job creators, and that they matter, and start having legislations that help those ones. And then network density is also like a really, really important one. I guess we have it in London, so that's why maybe some of you would think, oh yeah, obviously that totally makes sense for those of you who are from London. But it's true that having an environment where you can go to a coffee shop and bump into a potential investor is totally different from places where we do have events and there's basically no one that even knows what a startup is, so let alone being your investor or your co-founder. So that's really one thing that is important. Like obviously this area with Level 39 and All Street really prove how every day you have more serendipity options and meeting new potential partners and founders and all that. Leadership is really important as well. Having role models is really important for getting inspired as an entrepreneur, and that I think no one doubts it. So that's a really important ingredient. And then engagement and diversity. That's really important for me to have not only events and certain amount of events and certain amount of programs where it's kind of like the entry door to entrepreneurship, but also diversity and openness for those. Obviously, it doesn't have the same value if you feel like it's a kind of a cool kids club. So we obviously don't want that, and organize an ecosystem that allows that door to be really open and for everyone is really, really important. And then talent, obviously, if you're in an ecosystem where you can't find enough developers, where you can't find enough talent to join your team or your startup and then grow, that makes it really, really hard. So the talent pool is essential, and universities, having enough universities that also are aware of startups and how they can help entrepreneurs grow is definitely a key ingredient. That was the 9 ingredients. Sorry if it's hard to swallow, but those are really important. And way too often we just go for, oh yeah, the number of events and number of investors, and that's what people think is missing necessarily, when over the years we've realized that it wasn't the only thing. So I guess as an organization, what we try to have impact on is not necessarily the number of startups that come out of the events, but also what we've looked at from the standpoint of where our impact is impacting people's life. We've done a couple of surveys, and it turns out that 65% of the people that we asked reported that Startup Weekend had a substantial impact in their life after 1 year, which I think is kind of like obviously a little blurry of a statistic, but really at least shows the sentiment that people have towards that moment in their life where they took that step. 90% of the attendees continue to work on startup-related stuff after the event with someone that they met there, which is also really shows the impact on the connections. The lifespan of the startup itself, though it's not our main goal, 11% of the teams actually are still alive after 12 months, which is pretty good when you think about the fact that they didn't know one another before and they just met randomly on a Friday night. For career as well and for job opportunities, 38% of the attendees get at least one job offer after the event, which is pretty nice. And in terms of attendance, I'm going to go for that one first. 27 attend Startup Weekend more than once, which means that people really, really go for learning new skills and for meeting new people as opposed to just creating your startup. The one that really, really matters to me is the impact that we've seen that was related to people changing their careers. In a way, because I was saying that what we want to influence is really about experiential education. It's about training people to become entrepreneurs. So 25% of them actually changed their career within a year to become full-time entrepreneurs. And that really matters because it means that we were basically allowing people to fail, completely crash and burn at the event if needed. They create a startup, it fails on the Sunday night, it's not selected, or somebody says it's not a good idea, whatever. Something actually discourages them, but in a way, they just most of the time go back on track and within a year start something else. So it's pretty powerful. There's some other studies that we've done that are pretty interesting. Another GIF. One of them, and I actually have put the short link here if you want to have a look at it. We work with a couple of researchers on studying team synchrony. So it's a whole paper about the science behind team spirit. And what we did was that at one of our events, we basically put bracelets on people's wrists, looking at their emotions and their pulse and the intensity of their emotions at the event, and as a team, how synchronized they were. So our assumption was that teams that were more synchronized as individuals would actually become more successful, and that's exactly what we found. It was that basically as a team, if 5 people were on stage and we found that before going on stage and during and even during the event, they had good team synchrony, then the result on the judges' emotions were also very similar, which was super interesting. And there's just so many things we can find out like that. It really, really showed that it had an impact and that it's not only something we say when we say, oh yeah, it's the teams that matter. It really is something that you can prove. There's a lot of papers that we did like that, working with researchers, but that's something that we definitely look forward to doing a bit more. And it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that we're an organization that has so much data, but so little time to actually study it. If we were to do more of those studies, we'd have a couple of breakthroughs, I hope. So here are some of the things that I think we could do a better job at as an organization in terms of research and analyzing data, is analyzing our audience. I think we do a really shitty job right now at looking at the audience and who comes in and trying to have people that come from more diverse backgrounds. If we were to look at that and study it, we'd realize that we think that anyone can come to a startup weekend, but it's probably not the case. Then predicting team success during the event. Part of it comes from what I was talking about just earlier, and team synchrony. So we did some of the things like that, looking at, for example, what was the optimum number for people in a team. We realized that when people were 7 in their teams, their chances of winning the event and going forward afterwards were super higher, were actually much higher than any other number, which is fun. I don't know if it's because 7 is the lucky number, but in a way, I think it was because there was a good mix of skill sets. It allowed people to split tasks during the event, but not to be too crowded either, because larger teams were actually failing. I think we could do a better job at more longitudinal studies and looking at the data from that standpoint is really what happens afterwards. Some of the numbers that I showed you earlier, we've basically done surveys a year after a massive event where we had about 200 startup weekends around the world, so that we had kind of a good overview and that it was at the same time and all that. But I think in a way, looking at all those people that have been through the events and knowing what made them successful, how many events they were going to, and even working with accelerators and investors and seeing, okay, what's the perfect path? Maybe if we were to look at it more closely, we'd find what is the perfect path to becoming an entrepreneur. And then thriving communities, again, looking at what makes a successful entrepreneur is great, but being able to also know how do you compare startup communities with one another? Are they even comparable? And how do you try to make them more helpful for entrepreneurs at an individual level? That would be something that we definitely need to look into and that we have the data for, basically. And in a way, I thought that I would be more genuine and really tell you this is what we do, and this is we have data on so many things. So if any of you is interested in talking a bit more and has any advice, any questions, I'm going to be hanging around afterwards, and I'm happy to talk to you guys. Thank you. I don't know if we have time for Q&A, or is it too...
Yeah?
Yeah?
Just maybe one question.
Yeah?
Are you based in London?
Yes. Yeah, we have our global office or headquarters in Seattle, but we have our European office right here at Google campus. Yeah, we're a small team, but right around Wall Street. Yeah. So yeah, if anyone is interested afterwards, even later on. Cool, perfect.
Any other questions? No? Let's give it up for staff.
Thank you.